wait, Nico, maybe 1 minute maximum, but we will not hold people back. And we just start sharp after 1 minute. And super happy to have you, and really interesting about the conversations that we are going to have.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity, Psemek. It was lovely preparing for this session.
Actually, we had some interesting discussions at the beginning, right? I mean, just the preparation for a webinar itself was a nice journey because we exchanged ideas and thought. So I think it was cool to do it by itself.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so before all come, I just gonna ask you one question. I checked that you are actually a chess trainer.
Yeah, that was my previous career before I joined the Databox.
Jesus, and you were training the Danish national team.
Yeah, exactly.
Holy
But I
moly!
know, Poland. I mean, you're based in Poland, right? I know all the
Yeah,
guys from the
Jan
team.
Krzysztof Duda,
Duda, he's one of my favorite
Wojtaszek.
players. Exactly.
Nice. So, do you feel that Magnus Carlsen will be there on the top for the next decade?
Yeah. He's a bit bored. He doesn't like to play that much, so that's a bit unfortunate. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, he's the best.
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous how they can predict so many moves. And what's your FIDE ranking?
I am a bit below 2400.
Oh, holy crap, that's a lot.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, holy cow. So now I understand why you're so good in revenue operations, analytics, data, training people, and being the coach, because you actually have a really great experience in chess.
Exactly. RevOps is thinking strategically, making sure that you have a good idea of all the what the company is doing across sales, marketing, customer success. It's the same with chess. You cannot look at one side of the board only. You need to have a holistic
Yeah.
view.
Awesome. Okay, so let's dive deep into this. People, just let us know if you actually can hear and see us well. I will launch a presentation, so we start right now. Yeah, and please let us know if you actually can see the screen, because sometimes the technical issues might occur. So all is good. Dankeschön, Markus. Cool. So slideshow. That's actually the end, guys. So now a quick preview of what's going to happen. But before you see all of this, we are going to talk about improving revenue metrics, because we have Nikos, a GTM Manager from Databox. So who is better to talk about data than Databox? And what, guys, we want to bring to you today is support you in shaping your strategy for 2024, and understand what kind of revenue metrics you should be focusing on, and how to find those bottlenecks and opportunities for you to increase your revenue for the next year. And let's start with some kind of a statistics. So we all know that their market was quite shaky recently, and things changed from time to time, from year to year. So since 2020, tech industry, I suppose, was at the beginning quite afraid of what's going to happen due to the pandemic, but it turned out it was a rapid growth for Zoom Info-like companies, and a lot of SaaS companies grew really, really fast. But suddenly, things started to drop a bit in 2021, 22 after the bubble. And we can see that the companies are rebounding now in 2023. So, and this is actually the big companies, because on the next slide, we can see that the smaller companies, actually SaaS companies, yet haven't rebounded from this drop in 2021, 2022. And Nikos, like, what's your perspective on the market right now? You think we are bouncing back, or it's still something, some depression in front of us?
Yeah, the very small experience that we have from talking to marketing agencies and small to medium companies is that they are still feeling uncertain. There are also things like AI that they feel uncertain how this will impact their operations and their business moving forward. So there is some uncertainty, but we do see companies investing, especially in their marketing and sales. So, I mean, I don't see that much of people do believe in a better future.
Yeah, and I think
It's not all black.
emotions usually play a big role in a market, and also same as a stock, right? It's a lot about emotions, not just what's happening on the market, like uh, looking at the numbers, but also how people feel about it.
Yeah, exactly. And what happens in these uncertain times when you're not sure what will happen is that you revert back to the things that you know well. So what we see is that companies revert back to traditional marketing things. They are doing cold outreach that they were ever doing.
Yeah.
Technology helps. So we see companies that invest, especially in their marketing. This is my limited view of the market.
Interesting. So from our side, it's that we also see a little bit drop in marketing budgets. I mean, what we've seen in the past was that there was a lot of money on the market because of inflation, because of printing money, because of investment funds that wanted to spend it. So companies were much more willing to experiment and try new things without uh, being sure about the return on investment. And now it's people still invest, companies still invest, but as you mentioned, they try things that are proven and they experiment a bit less if they don't see a direct ROI from the activities or investments on software, for example.
Yeah, that was a good point. We see them invest or going back to the channels that have worked with for them in the past. In marketing, many times, as you said, companies are thinking to expand to see what other channels can offer. Hey, let's do a bit of podcasting. Let's do a bit of thought leadership in social media. We don't see that. We see them going back to traditional marketing practices, not so
And
much experimentation.
you mean by that SEO, like paid ads, paid search, these kind of things, or what do you mean by
Yeah.
traditional?
Absolutely. In fact, a couple of days ago, we released a new report, and we asked the B2B marketers, especially, what is the things that they will invest a lot, and SEO is by far at the top.
Interesting. Last year we were saying SEO is dead, demand gen, all of this, and now yeah, companies tell that they're going to invest the most in SEO. Interesting. Let's move. So yeah, as you can see, as smaller companies still struggle more to rebound from the drop in the market from the last year. Uh, and what is also interesting is that I mean that's a common situation, right? What we can see on the graph is that people see more growth in retention than an expansion than in the new business. I think that's simple as that. The demand is less than before, is lower than before. So it's harder to acquire a client. People spend a bit less, so it costs more to actually acquire those clients. So naturally, you are more careful, and I think you are putting more attention to your current customers, not to lose them, because it's much harder to acquire new ones. But my feeling is that when the market and the hype is going, will be back in a few years maybe, everyone will forget that it was a bit harder, and there will be once again a lot of money on the market, and people will try to spend. I believe many companies will again, go in a growth at all costs and pay too little attention probably to expansion and retention. I know, what are your feelings, Nikos?
Um, what we believe in Databox and what we see with our partners as well is retention and reducing churn should be the top priority of companies today. But sometimes, as you said, it feels that we need to add a new thing, we need to bring new prospects. Companies that are healthy, they work a lot to reduce their churn and improve their retention. This is always a very healthy practice. And that
Yeah.
this is our priority in Databox as well. And we see that the winners are those that they're able to solve the issue with churn, reducing churn and improving retention.
Yeah, and I think what is also, I mean, we will speak about it probably soon, the impact, right? Like you need to have a good product, you need to bring value to the customers to eventually retain them. And that's the only sustainable way to grow. I mean, keep your customers. And there are other statistics that in SaaS, you should have around above 100% or close to 100% net retention rate. So including renewals plus upsell and cross-sell. So you shouldn't be losing the value you have from the customers. If you keep losing that, probably it's hard to grow because you have holes in your bucket, how they say, right?
Absolutely. Also, retention creates the word of mouth, this magic thing that all of us we try to create. But good user experience and people that love you and stay with you for longer time. These are the people that create referrals and the word of mouth, which basically generates later more new sales.
Yeah, exactly. Uh, So what companies are actually tracking when it comes to B2B marketing measurements? So just to give a little bit of intro for you guys, how people are looking at the metrics. So revenue, obviously, this is one of the primary metrics everyone tracks. Then pipeline growth, return on investment from the campaigns, and then if you move a little bit top of the funnel, those are marketing qualified leads, lead engagement, so probably some conversions, meeting schedules from outbound, and awareness like branding metrics. And this is what usually was measured in B2B marketing. And what we can see, this also shows a little bit that marketing mostly looks at the new business, right? Those are not metrics who are typical for retention, probably an upsell, cross-sell.
Yeah, our experience is that it is very important for internal teams to prove that what they are doing brings results. So the especially revenue and conversion metrics that show actually revenue and money. Um, they are trying to track them more and more, and they care a bit less about top of the funnel metrics.
Now, you mean that now this is the change that companies focus more on those direct revenue metrics rather than indirect?
Yeah. Also, top of the funnel metrics, many times it's difficult to actually understand them. Okay, you know that you have more seasons, but it's difficult to know where exactly they come these seasons. Okay, we discussed about SEO, but in this dynamic environment that there are now, there is not someone saw you on Google. Usually it is multiple touch points. Someone has seen you on LinkedIn, they have heard about you, and they also see you on Google. So it is much more difficult to understand the awareness metrics to gain a deep understanding. But lower in the funnel, it is much easier to understand the conversions and what you can do to improve your processes to get better conversions.
And it's alongside this whole new idea, I mean, not new idea, but the concept of demand generation and this dark funnel that, as you mentioned, there are so many interactions that are contributing to pipeline growth or to conversion for, let's say, a meeting, that it's hard to define which one is actually more important and which investments was the most critical. Plus, if you look at the attribution, like a software attribution, probably we've seen it many times that you can choose different models of attribution and suddenly you have a complete different metrics. You can have a different software and even with the same attribution model, a different software like HubSpot or maybe, I don't know, revenue data or some other like third-party tools will show you a different data. And if you run your own SQL, it probably will show different data. This is what we see within the company. So yeah, it's really hard to eventually be decisive on the top of the funnel. So people are leaning more towards same as famous Chris Walker also is mentioning, measure the pipeline, more of a GTM, go to market. So you can probably take all of those actions all together, meaning outbound or inbound or ABM, and just measure which kind of campaign bring you pipeline, but don't try to check if specifically, I don't know, this LinkedIn ad brought you ROI or maybe some smaller actions like, I don't know, brand advertising, right? Because it's really hard to attribute.
And it is more a belief thing. If you have a message and you have optimized it for the right audience and you believe in that, then long term you're going to see results. It's something that we have seen, for example, for Databox, but people that we work with and companies that we work with. Yeah.
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, exactly.
So Let's move next because I probably overtalked a bit. So guys, now let's really tell how we look also from the revenue operations perspective, how we look at the metrics and revenue, and probably then Nikos will get back a bit to go more into the details, how to improve each of these. So simple model, maybe not as simple as I now presented it, but I will explain. So there is an input for your revenue, and usually you need to get more, let's call it leads, but we can also say hand raisers, people who say, yes, I want to talk to you, and how you can bring them into your funnel through inbound or through demand generation or through outbound activities or ABM or any other go-to-market motion you think are most suitable for you. It can be also maybe events or referrals or partners channel, but basically you need to bring something in, and those are hand raisers. Then after those hand raiser, you generate certain pipeline. So you generate a value that is potential opportunity for you. And if you close them, you have customers. And now if you have customers, if you bring impact to them, then you have a recurring customers. And at the end, you have output with money, which comes from either new business sales, so direct customers from the pipeline, or maybe the customers who did the upsell, cross-sell, or renewal with you, which is called expansion. And eventually you have a lifetime value. So the more lifetime value you have, so probably the biggest impact, the bigger impact you bring, you increase the lifetime value or maybe the higher deals you sell, then probably you can spend a bit more into your customer acquisition cost. And usually they say that you should have around minimum 3 times the customer acquisition cost should be 3 times less than the lifetime value. Maybe this is something you can also share your thoughts on that, Nikos. Like, what's the ratio between lifetime value and customer acquisition cost that you usually see?
Yeah, usually the magic number is 3 to 3.5, right? This is what we all try to get. One thing here, I believe that this is a very important model, and honestly, I think this way and we operate this way, but we should always, and companies should always create processes for people that they can appear at any part of this funnel at any moment. So we see sometimes people that become customers, we call them self-served, and after they become customers, they raise their hand and they say, we need help. So you need to be sure that you're able and you're flexible enough to understand that any user, any prospect can appear to any part of this funnel at any point.
Exactly. I mean, it's not linear that I will do a research, then I will raise hand, then I will become a customer. Yeah, I can probably right away come to you and you will not notice me doing the research before I actually become a customer maybe or convert on your website.
Yeah, it's always important to have this consideration.
So this is what now this simple model can be operationalized, and this is what we do in revenue operations, and we call it data model. So how now are you operationalizing? And there are a lot of details. Maybe you will get a bit frightened by that, but it's quite simple. So basically, you have a stages that defines the relationship you have up until now with your customers, right? And it can be a prospect, a marketing qualified lead, a sales qualified lead, a sales accepted lead, which turns into an opportunity. Then you start to have a process of basically deal management, and the pipeline usually is there, and you measure the opportunity to close. You onboard customers, you retain them, you upsell and cross-sell to eventually reach lifetime value. And it's really important that you can clearly define at which stage your current customer is. I mean, how far did you go with your relationship? And you track usually 3 metrics, which is conversion rate between those stages, the volumes on these stages, and the time, how much it takes from you to, let's say, to turn a lead to an opportunity or to close an opportunity, which is a sales cycle that you usually have, right? And super important to remember about the second part of the funnel. So how many customers that you, let's say, became your customers, how many of them renew, or how many of them upsell, cross-sell, become lifetime value. And if you're a service business, not a SaaS, you also can check how many, if you signed one contract, how many customers sign another contract with you, and then how many customers became turned into a lifetime value. So this is basically operationalizing the data model and the stuff we were saying before. And Okay, I think that this is I don't want to overcomplicate it. Nikos, your take on that? It's credit to Notion Capital, but it's basically winning by design model. Are you familiar? Do companies use it?
Yeah, absolutely. We use a very similar model. I would just say that it took us quite a lot of time to identify what the stages mean for us. We needed to go back to the drawing board a few times, and then to understand the processes and how we move people down the funnel. And the right part of the funnel, as we said before, especially today, is at least as important and with the left side of the funnel.
Exactly. And I think that this is, companies usually or departments look inside of a specific stage. Let's say marketing just looks how many MQLs they generated, and they look at those smaller metrics. And if you are really, I don't know, chief revenue officer or even sales or marketing, you should really be looking at a broader perspective, in my opinion, especially as the executive board. So as you mentioned, defining those stages are critical. What does it mean, a lead, MQL, SQL for us? And you should probably be looking at it like, what are the conversion paths? So if I have an inbound motion, what does it mean a lead for me? What does it mean an MQL for me? What does it mean SQL? And the same, if I do outbound, what does it mean lead, MQL, and SQL for me? And how do I run processes around it? Because then you can clearly also understand what kind of go-to-market motions bring you certain results. And the conversion rate will tell you about also a lot about your company. When you go from leads to MQL, it means the quality of your database, in our case, the quality of our database and our go-to-market campaigns. So does really our marketing oftentimes and outbound campaigns generate the right leads that convert into MQLs? And then if we have those MQLs that are somehow engaged or are more likely to close, can we activate them? Can we actually start discussions with these people? And obviously from let's say opportunity to customer, this is the quality of the sales process. Is the sales process good enough enough good to sustain as our company, or we should improve something? And then we have benchmarks, right? So there are typical conversion rates on a certain stage that you can compare yourself to. Here you can see a winning by design. If you guys want to have more whole PDF around it, let me know, I can send it out. But basically what it is here on the left side, you have what's the average contract value. So if you have an average contract value, let's say between 15 to 50K, these are the typical conversion rates you should have at each stage. So from a new contact to a marketing qualified contact, it should be 20% of your database. 25% marketing qualified lead should probably have some kind of a conversation with you, be activated. Here it says 95% from sales qualified lead to open deal, which is the sales accepted lead, and 30% on a win rate on the pipeline. So every third deal I open, I close it. And as you can see, the higher deal size, the higher conversion rates there should be, because you probably are opening it much more powerfully, but at the same time the sales cycles are longer. Do you see similar conversion rates, or how do you see it in Databox?
Yeah, we work with many companies where we set these things inside their HubSpot, or we help them to set these things inside their HubSpot so that they can bring all this reporting inside Databox. Because one good thing about Databox is that you can bring your CRM data and connect it with data from other data sources, actually, or from custom data sources from more than 100 tools. So when you have this data inside your CRM, first of all, as someone that is doing RevOps, it's an amazing exercise if you do it in your company, even if you are a small company, right? To gather a few guys and for a few days try to understand how, let's say, or see the journey of some of your customers and try to understand these rates, because what usually happens is that you will clearly see friction happening in some part of the funnel. Usually it's not everywhere, but you will see, hey, we're doing great, but on that particular place in the funnel, it seems that something is not working. Let's dive in there. And usually this is where the magic happens. And in the model that you presented, Semek, if you are able to improve the conversion rate, this CR that you have there, on a very small percentage, down the line, this means a lot of extra money. So even if you identify a small friction, something small in a process that you can do a little bit better, then this means a huge, it will pay huge dividends later.
I actually have, this is right. Why we actually need to track these metrics that we showed here, maybe I'm going to back, right? Conversion rate, how much time it takes, the volumes, because eventually this actually defines a lot of your, this is the input for any kind of your forecasting or revenue modeling. Usually, as you can see, inputs are the average contract value. And then maybe you also have certain conversion rates and you want to ask yourself how much you can spend for each marketing qualified lead. And if you know these numbers, you can easily forecast it, understand the budgeting that you have, and model the future result. And actually, I want to go next to the stuff that you mentioned, because exactly, small metrics makes a huge difference. And let's see the idea how you can look at your revenue. Let's say if you would plan it for the next year, you have an output first, right? You want to reach certain revenue. Let's say we want to have a 375,000 euros revenue. Then you need to understand your assumptions, which is conversion rates, your average contract value. And if you understand those assumptions, and this is why you should also track the data and have historical data, because if you don't have it, you basically need to give, assumptions, and you need to just bring it out of the blue and guess it, and then later on iterate. But this is why you need to have this constant tracking, and maybe you could leverage historical data. And then you understand exactly the inputs you need to have to reach a certain output based on those assumptions. And you can play around with those numbers. So you can check, okay, what if we would like to reach more revenue, assuming we have same conversion rate? What could change if we would have a different assumption, let's say improve MQL to SQL rate? Maybe you sometimes can increase the average contract value. And then sometimes you need maybe just more inputs, or maybe you need the same amount of inputs, but you just need a better conversion rate. And let's play a little bit, right? Because I think this is fun here, right? I will try to now open up the open source here. Here, share this. Can you see the Excel file, Nikos?
Yeah.
So I think this is super fun to play with numbers and be practical. So let's assume as a company, you have 120 SQLs across the whole year. And now we play a little bit with the assumptions and the improvements you can make across the metrics from your end-to-end funnel that we talked about. So let's assume that you have SQL to opportunity 70%, from opportunity to customer 10%, average contract value 75%, renewal is 50%. So this is your revenue, and this is how many deals you can close for the entire year. And now let's just change those numbers by just 5%. Let's say first two, and suddenly you reach. You almost double the revenue, right? But it's just a small 5% here and 5% here. And I think a lot of companies and people don't recognize that. It's not just about probably bringing more volumes. Oftentimes, it's, as you mentioned, just fixing some bottlenecks, and you can see a huge uplift at the end of the revenue. For example, if you would increase here the churn, right? Suddenly have 500,000 by improving the churn by 20%. Nikos, your thoughts on this? I love numbers. You are also the chef.
This is where the magic happens, Semek, because people might see this and they might think, okay, what are these changes? What are the things that move the needle on a 5%? This, I can assure you from my experience, this can be really basic things. For example, simple messaging. Many SQLs are coming from the marketing because they read something in a certain way in your website, but your sales rep, they're using another language. Or at some point, maybe your sales team has discovered an amazing offer that, hey, this software works really, really well, and we're able to close much more people that talk to us. And then marketing and sales talk together, and you put this offer in your website, and then everything blows up. You can go from 3 times up the revenue because so what I'm trying to say is best practices and things that you discover on the go. These are the things that you should use, and these are the things that when you discover something, they move the needle slightly from the conversion from one stage to the other, and this brings huge results down the line.
Exactly. I mean, best practices, for example, and if you are an advanced company, you probably would measure those conversion rates, volumes across different segments. So you can say, what is the funnel metrics when we look at the SMBs, at the enterprise level, or maybe across certain industries. But that's more advanced, and you can also, if you don't have at least the basic conversion time and volume metrics across the full funnel, start with just entire business. But then you can also segment it, and you can also probably look at the sales representatives in the sales pipeline. Probably some of your sales representatives have a conversion rate of 20%, maybe someone have 25, maybe someone have 17. And if you try to understand, as Nikos mentioned, those best practices that works for a certain rep, maybe you can upskill the other reps, and suddenly, you don't need to invest much more in marketing, bring more lead. You can just do this and have much more revenue at the end of your funnel, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these are the things that I love. Honestly, this is where I said that the magic happens. And it might look complicated, but it really is not. I advise everyone to go down and do this exercise.
And I think it's hard to believe before you do math. If you do math like this and you suddenly show it on the numbers, people think, okay, shit, it actually makes sense. And maybe I should not overload you with figuring out new beautiful campaigns. Maybe we have opportunities that are much simpler and easier to reach, but we haven't realized that there is so much to gain, right?
On a personal level, I remember my first big success in Databox when I realized, when I was working in the business development team back then, I was a team lead, that a certain offer that we were doing to our users, in the few cases that we did that, improved this conversion rates from 25% to 40%. And then we created a process to give this offer to almost everyone. And we had so many sales calls that we had to hire more people. So
nice.
yeah, and it's not that you don't need to be brilliant and to think of the brilliant idea. You just need to be observant and observe what works and what not.
Correct. So getting back to this, right? First, you need to be able to track, and it's important to define what it means each stage and what do you actually track. And if you can track those conversion rates, volumes, and time metrics, and you understand your values from average conflict value, you suddenly, as Nikos mentioned at the beginning, we realize that there are certain bottlenecks. Maybe it is that you have too low amount of SQLs and you do really well and you just need to bring more. Sometimes it is the case as well. But oftentimes you might discover that, increasing win rates on the pipeline stage, certain pipeline stage is really important. Maybe you need to increase the renewal rate from 60 to 75%. And oftentimes when you really plan a sales goals or revenue goals for the next year, you should just be looking at the entire funnel, and each of your team departments should have a clear understanding what will move the needle in the next year. And I think that this is critical for a lot of companies to reverse engineer, start with goals they want to have, and then find those biggest levers of growth they can find.
Absolutely.
But as you probably will say, those are oftentimes lagging indicators, and this needs to be translated into specific actions that may move the renewals or win rates, right? So I think everyone knows those objective key results model, where you say when you can have a certain objectives based on the data model that you want a certain measures to improve, and then define like a smaller, more granular key results or actions that actually drive those measurements. I think that's quite simple, but that's also important to mention, right? That it's not as easy to just say, let's increase win rate by 5%. Then you need to actually plan actions that are going to impact it.
Yeah,
because there are a lot of metrics
you
can choose from, right? And when you start to, data model is quite simple. Just measure conversion rate, volume, and time, and you can see the bigger picture. But then you need to dive deeper a little bit into a more granular metrics. And this is where I leave it actually to you. So how do you manage it with companies to actually find those metrics that are important to measure, and how you benchmark maybe to actually understand that there is a space for improvement?
Yeah. Should I share my screen?
Please.
Okay. Yeah, we will take a slight step back to the basics, because you presented the more general the more general model, right? So what I will try to, and this is something that I always do also in Databox, I say, hey, we need to go back to basics. So some common problems that don't allow companies, based on personally my experience and what we see by working with thousands of companies in Databox. Companies are not sure if they track the correct KPIs. You showed right now that there is an ocean of data and different metrics and conversion metrics and ratio metrics that you can create from these metrics. So many times companies are not sure that they track the correct one. Also, they are not confident that everyone inside the company understands all these things. Also, all the things that we discussed right now is how we do against ourselves. At the same time, we need to have the perspective what others are doing. And also, they're not sure how to analyze data, and they're unsure of what goals to set. First of all, before we dive into that, if we track data, if we do the exercise that you showed, Semek, and generally, if we start tracking data. Okay, I'm working in Databox, which is a business analytics tool where you can bring everything there. But honestly, you don't need a tool like that. And especially talking to smaller companies, you can put things in a spreadsheet and start by doing that. You don't need to pay for a tool. So the idea is, if we start tracking our data, do we see improvements in our performance? People say yes. The vast majority of people say, when we monitor and report on our performance, we see our performance getting better and better. This is a hypothesis, but we actually tested this hypothesis with companies that we surveyed, and we see that this is what they experience. What also we discovered is that people, they're not confident. They are unsure if they're tracking the right things. Why? You showed why. There are so many things that you can track and so many things that you can put focus. So there is always, hey, am I tracking the right thing? Also, let's say that you track all this data. We are very much in favor of transparency. We believe that if you share this data openly in your company, then you will see people coming with ideas. You will see people saying, hey, this is a friction point, as we discussed. But we see that half of companies believe that not everyone in their company understands data, and they think that this is a problem. Only 53% of the companies that we surveyed say that everyone in the company understand data. So that's another common issue for those that they want to be data-driven. So this is when we work with companies that have these issues, we teach them sometimes how to analyze their data, because that's important. Data is there, but you need to get insights out of this. And we have our models, and we have what you showed before is how to create a model that is predictable, that if I do this, this is what I should expect. And this is what we call also in Databox predictable performance. But before that, there is one step, which is to be able to analyze data and get actionable insights. So that's why I said I will take a step back. And there are two things that companies can do, which is drilling down a metric to its dimensions, because there are multiple factors. Take any metric, let's say seasons. There are multiple factors that affect your seasons. So you need to drill it down to understand which are these factors and maybe focus on one of these in order to get actionable insights. And the other thing, for example, seasons or even a conversion rate is a number. The number rarely says the whole story. If we put that in a dashboard and we're able to see the time series, the trend, you will able to identify many things. So goals. We discussed about goals. Companies are very uncertain about goals. They and we see this all the time. They tell us this all the time. And what usually happens is that in order for them to feel more certain, they take their historical performance and they say, okay, this is how we performed previous month. Let's put a goal that we will perform 2% better or 5% better the next quarter. But what happens, what experience says, is that they revise it all the time, which is fine. It is healthy in many cases. But what I'm trying to say is that setting goals, it seems to be a common problem among many companies. And I believe personally, this is my something that I have personally worked a lot with companies, is the mindset of setting up goals. Of course, there are many frameworks, how to set SMART goals and so on, but all these goals that companies discuss about, they're short-term goals based on their current resources and their past performance. So for example, we say that we had 10 sales reps and we had 100 calls. So every sales rep had 10 calls the previous month. Okay, let's say that next month we will have 120 calls, 12 per rep. And this is how many companies are setting up goals based on the resources that they have. What we say here is that another way to set up goals is think strategically ahead. It's not what is possible for me to do now, but where should I aim long term? And that's really difficult, but I will show you a way how you can do this. When you set the long-term strategic goal, which is based on objective data, it is not based on my desire to be there, then you can work backwards and set the short-term goal, and you can make your planning, what the resources you need, and so on. How we can set the strategic goals with benchmarks. Benchmarks tell us what others are doing, how others, very similar to us, are performing. Okay, so, and we need to know where we stand, how we stack up against them. Because if everyone, let's imagine the scenario that we grew up our sales revenue 7% the previous quarter. Maybe this means that we should celebrate, and I'm not against celebrating here, but what if all of our competitors grew their revenue by 15%? Is this good, or are we actually falling behind? So is the goal for next quarter to grow 10% good, or it's not? So benchmarks can give you this perspective, how people around you are doing. Let me give you a very simple example. This is from our benchmark groups app. It shows, it shows the bounce rate as a benchmark. By the way, this is for universal Google Analytics. In Google Analytics, there is not bounce rate, although in Databox you will be able to find the bounce rate. Usually in Google Analytics it is called engagement rate. But let's see this example. Let's see that you see that our own bounce rate is on 80%. But on the companies that are similar to us, the median, which means 50% of the companies, they have a 60% bounce rate. So you have now a better perspective that where I want to get is at least to do as well as others are doing and get to 60%. If bounce rate is very important for you because your website works in a certain way, and it is important for you to improve your bounce rate. So you know now that your strategic goal is 60%. Maybe you don't have the resources to get there next month or next quarter, but you know now that you can set goals in between in order to get to 60% bounce rate. And after that, what we see in this distribution is that the top quintile, the top performers, their bounce rate is 42%. So if you want to start beating your competitors and go ahead of them, then you know where you need to go. The top guys, very similar to you, their bounce rate is 42%. And this is one example for one metric. And this is only one of the ways that you can use industry and market benchmarks to get strategic goals or understand a bit better which are the things that you are doing really well and which are the things that you fall behind. Because typically we are biased towards the things that we do very well. Or sometimes when we might feel that something is completely broken and we need to put a lot of resources on that, but you see the benchmarks and you see, no, actually I'm doing pretty well there. Maybe I should allocate my resources to something else. And I know that we don't have a lot of time, so it will take me less than a minute. I just wanted to show you this app that we have in Databox, which is completely for free. All you need to do is sign up and plug in your data, and you will see something like that, which is a typical benchmark. And the benchmark will show you your own performance. In the group that you are, where is the median? In that case, it is this 2.1K, for example, for page views. Where are the bottom performers and the top performers, so that you can understand where you stack up. For example, here, this benchmark tell us that we outrank 60% of the companies in our cohort, and we are ahead of the median. That's why it is green, and it is not, if we were below the median, it would have been red. So we're using also this color code for people to understand really easily. And this is only one way that we can use benchmarks, Samek. So just to wrap up, all the things that you described and we have adopted and we apply as well is work with yourself based on your previous performance, how to improve and that's really important. But sometimes you need the extra perspective, what others similar to you are doing, and this will give you the feedback that you need in order to further improve. I would say not to further improve, but to know where you will allocate the resources in the next initiatives that you will have in the future.
Yeah, same as you do salary review for the next year, and you want to benchmark yourself what the average salaries on the market right now, so you know how to act. So guys, Nikos, really I appreciate this. Was an amazing closing part for all what we've talked. Guys, please feel free to ask the questions right now, because we will be still here for a few minutes if you want. And to conclude, right? So Nikos, what we had first, you need to have. I love how you named it the predictable revenue model. So how do you measure your data to predict your potential revenue? So you understand what you want to improve. Then B, you need to historically track it, analyze it, and first understand where are your biggest bottlenecks and find those small pieces. And you sometimes need to look at the dimensions, drill down to actually understand it. You can use Databox to benchmark yourself within those metrics that you feel like you should be improving to see where probably how much of an uplift you can bring, or maybe you're already doing well and even you believe that there is an improvement, probably it will be hard for you to get there. And I think that's it from my side. Nikos, your last words.
Yeah, there is one last part, which is forecasting. You talked a bit about predictably trying to understand your revenue. Maybe we can talk another time about forecasting, but what we believe and what we see, and something that is technology-wise was not available to companies a few years ago, to be able to track everything. And if you have the right processes and the models that you explained, you can do really well. But also benchmark yourself and be able to forecast. But we are in this exciting, and only companies that are bigger and they had a dedicated team, they were able to afford to do forecasting and benchmarking. But now technology, the exciting times that we live, for example, Meta has free forecasting models that you can use.
Correct.
So yeah, technology has democratized these things, and even smaller companies can do.
Exactly. So I would add that also, guys, we basically roll out these kind of metrics, which we call lifecycle stages in HubSpot, and measurement, hold the measurement model. We can probably roll out in maximum 60 days. Having in mind your current data and just reset whatever you have in your system based on the triggers. So what do you define as a certain stage? Then we can reset all of the contacts to really set them for the stage that they hit those triggers, and you can understand your current data. Maybe not as much in the past, how the volumes converted. So this time, the time series, but at least you understand what you're at right now. And as Nikos mentioned, it's not that you need to spend that much. You can do it with Marketing Pro and our service of for maximum 1 month. So it's really achievable. Questions. So first, advice for small businesses when there's just big contracts, long sales cycles, and not many probably volumes happening. My take on that is, Nikos, that if you're a really small company, you are just thinking about closing any contract for whatever it takes, and it's not yet the moment to probably measure as much because you have few deals every year, and it's much more about measuring your engagements, tracking your target accounts list that you have. So I suppose it's a bit more into go-to-market that you need to focus than whole funnel optimization at that point. Nikos, your take.
Yeah, we know pretty well that the average deal size is a different monster. The benchmarks are different. As here, Andre says, the time to close is different. So, my advice is to group this type of deals maybe to a different pipeline or track them differently because they have their own different processes, and do all these things just on the marketing is different for this type of you do more of a ABM type of lead generation for this type of deals. So it is a different thing. So you have several deals of several average contract values, then create a funnel for different average deal sizes.
But I would say still, if you can probably, as you mentioned, right, you have target account list, which is your, let's say, leads. You have 200 leads. MQLs are your conversations that you had with hand raisers. Then you have SQLs, whoever qualified to buy and you think you can bring them impact. Opportunities are the guys who you open any kind of a deal. So, if you have 200 accounts, the question is how many conversations you had, then how many of them actually qualified for you to buy. And even if there are small real numbers and you can measure it in Excel, I think it's still good to have these numbers.
Yeah. The model still will still be very valuable.
Exactly. And you can predict, right, that I need 2 deals for this amount. And if I need 2 deals, then how many qualified accounts I need? Probably assumptions are 5, 7. And then to have 5, 7 qualified, I need to have probably 15 conversations. So out of 200 accounts, I need to have 15 conversations minimum for large scale businesses, right?
Yeah, and marketing becomes more easy because you know that you can risk a bit more, you can do a few more things, you can be a bit more patient because that you know that the deal that you will get is bigger, so you can afford being more patient. Or it's a big discussion, Andre. I wish we had time to cover it, but it's a great question.
Revenue is lagging indicator. How to get a buy-in from a CEO when it comes to more top of the funnel metrics or demand gen activities. A typical question usually happens on the marketing side because everyone struggles. How do I prove my influence marketing revenue?
Yeah, demand gen takes 6 months to a year, and your CEO should understand that. I would go back to what I said. It is belief. If your messaging and positioning is optimized for your ICP, or for your buying personas. For the people that you want to talk to, then you should have the belief that even if you don't see the needle moving fast the first couple of months, that you should continue doing that. And the magic of demand generation that we have experienced in Databox, and I have experienced personally, is that if you have belief and you continue doing the right things, after 6 months to a year, you will start seeing magic leads generated from anywhere. And there are ways to track them. For example, you can track direct traffic in your homepage. And this is how you can see that most probably these are the results of your demand generation efforts, because demand gen does this magic thing that people have you on top of their mind, and at some point they go on Google and type your name, Databox, Man Digital, and you don't know where they came from. You see only direct traffic. So if you see over time your direct traffic going steadily up, then you know that more and more people either talk with each other and say, hey, go and check these guys at Man Digital, what they are doing. So more and more people will be putting your name directly on the browser, and what you will see is a bit your direct traffic going up on your homepage. This is one of the ways that you can show to your SEO and say, hey, look, it seems that we are getting the right thing. Our messaging is good. Then we should continue doing that. But that's my best advice that I can offer. It's a bit so of a belief. We also heard others doing it, and we said, okay, it makes sense for us to do this as well. But yeah, good luck convincing your executives that no results now. It is a bit long term, but we should continue putting money on that.
My partner recently heard somewhere, I think that also, and this is, I will have an idea for you, Marcus, but what my partner is saying, that life is too short to work for a CEO that doesn't understand marketing. That's the one point. But to be frank, right? Obviously, if you are in a demand gen, usually you have the first 3 months to prove any kind of a significant influence of your activities and get the buy-in and time from your CEO or executives to perform further. And how you can do this in the first 3 months. One thing is, I don't know if you have self-reported attribution installed, but if you don't, then it's much easier to prove that, I don't know, someone heard you from LinkedIn, someone heard you from Data, maybe from an event, maybe from word of mouth, but you have much, clearer indicators that demand gen bring results. And sometimes it's hard to detect by software, and sales will tell, we did it, but in fact, the customer will say they heard you from a podcast. So that's one idea. The second idea is, think about any kind of low-hanging fruit at the beginning that you have in the first 3 months. So I would usually start with your current database, check what current database you have, check any kind of engagements, intent indicators, whatever that you can send to a sales or SDRs, and right away open some meaningful conversations with a potential open deal. And then the third option is, this is why oftentimes people from marketing lean towards ABM, because you have a specific target account. Let's say you have 500 or 200 target accounts, depending on the type of ABM you do. If it's strategic, you just have few. But basically, you say, those are my 500 accounts or 1,000. I do a demand generation, so I do ads, I do content and everything. I publish it towards them and I advertise it. Plus, I have my outbound team maybe also having a customized content and specific use case-based message towards these audiences. And you can track the engagement. So I can see how many companies already engaged with me on a website from the reverse engineering, or just your tracking first party, meaning how many converted into the form submissions. And this is much quicker result that you can showcase engagement of these target accounts. Then you can show the revenue later on. But you know that this is the path to the success of revenue. So it's a bit easier then, because you clearly say, I engaged with 30%, I soon will convert 10% into conversations, and I want to have in a pipeline X%. Marcus, let us know if anything of this helped you.
And I second your suggestion for self-reporting attribution. We did this in Databox, and we discovered things amazing. we discovered that people were seeing us on Reddit, and we are nowhere on Reddit. So later we did the reverse engineer. Hey, let's go on Reddit and see who is talking about us. And this brought amazing partnerships or ideas. Or suddenly we saw that the third or fourth source for us is ChatGTP. Actually, people told us that they learned about us in ChatGTP, which was crazy, actually. So it can give you a lot of information. And if you see word of mouth referrals going up, you know that your demand gen is bringing results.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, if you have a siloed team where sales are being attributed to every revenue and you are just the marketing ones who bring leads, then something is wrong at the beginning, right? That you actually are not playing as a team, and you, as Nikos mentioned, revenue is a game of marketing, sales, and customer success. And if you have a hard time to prove any of your revenue, even in the past, then I think it's an issue at the beginning already in some kind of a mindset and the way you track marketing and sales activities. We track it by go-to-market, so we don't say, I mean, it was by marketing or by sales. We track how many specific ABM campaign or maybe inbound brought, and and we know that it's a game of both marketing and sales. It's not just one team.
Yeah, and I know that we are out of time, Semek, but many times it is very difficult to understand the impact of your customer success team, or even if you say good things to them, it is difficult for them to see the value. And if you have a self-reporting attribution where your word of mouth is quite high, you know that, hey, this should be at least in part attributed to your customer success team, because if they do a good job, this is good user experience, and good user experience creates referrals, word of mouth, and you can celebrate with this team and say, hey, look, you did well. That's how you can also bring into the party your customer success team, that sometimes they feel a bit, compared to marketing or sales, they feel a bit that, we're not getting enough credit.
Yeah, it's true. Okay, cool, guys. It was a pleasure, Nikos. Amazing discussion. Thank you, guys, for staying with us till the end. I wish everyone a good day, and we soon probably each other on the next webinar.
Thank you, everyone.
Cheers.